There's more to the story. That's my subject for today. There's more to the story. Touch your neighbor for the third of 17 times and tell them you don't even know. You don't know the half of it. What kind of voice was that? And it got me thinking, Joshua, when I left you last week, you were on carbohydrate overload, and Joshua had taken the people back to Shechem, the place where God made Abraham the promise, and now the promise has been proven. He's saying, don't forget. Now that you've been successful, don't forget. It would be easy now to settle, but don't stop here. Can't stop here. There's more that God wants to do. And really enjoyed preaching that sermon, but I had to stop. When you preach, you always feel a little bit frustrated no matter how much you feel like the sermon went well, because there's a lot that you would want to say that you didn't get to say. And in the case of last week, I should probably tell you something, and that is Joshua's motivational speech was not successful. And we kind of ended on a high note last week, but to really get the full context of what Joshua was saying to the people, you would have to go all the way to the book of Judges, where in Judges 2 verse 10, one of the saddest verses I think in the Bible says that after that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things he had done for Israel. I didn't want to close the sermon with that last week because I didn't think it would bring you holiday joy, but I thought we should pick up where we left off. There's more to the story. And it wasn't that the generation that lived after Joshua in the promised land didn't know the story, they just didn't own it. Is it possible that you know the story and have not yet owned it? It was cool to me the other day, Elijah, our oldest son, 11 years old, almost the same age as the church. I can always tell what dysfunctions the church is going to have next by studying his. Our church will enter its teenage years right after he does, so I'll be ready as a pastor. Nothing can prepare you as a parent. Some of y'all had a flashback right there, but it was cool the other day. He said, when did Elevation get big? Part of me wanted to say, big? We're just getting started right now. But to him, it's normal people get baptized every week. It's normal opening the 6th permanent location in less than 11 years. To him, it's normal black people and white people coming to church together. To him, it's normal, just normal. Normal stuff to him. Miracles to me, because I know the whole story. I always want to tell you the stories about the church. I don't want to bore you. There's so many stories I would want to tell you. If I were at Rock Hill today, I'd probably tell the story about when I went to speak at Winthrop University. Tyler Ford went with me. We loaded up my Jeep Cherokee and his vehicle too. We set up a booth, preached to 30 students in a room at Winthrop University. The church hadn't even really officially started yet. And there were 30 students in a room that seated about 12 to 1,500 people. It was an excellent atmosphere, let me tell you that right now. And when I got done preaching, I think they actually had the idea, Ben White, to use candles instead of lighting that day. They did it a candlelight thing in a big old room. It was terrible. It was supposed to be abstract or something like that, and it was just stupid. Anyway, we did the best we could, and we preached, and I said, come see me at the booth if you want to know more about this church I'm starting. And I would tell them if I were there about the 5 college students who came on over to the Matthews Community Center for a launch team meeting. I was so happy to see those college kids because our church had not yet reached critical mass. And never mind that they couldn't tithe. I didn't care they were broke. Even if they put a ramen noodle in the offering bowl, it was just good to have 5 people. To think now in that same town where I was excited to see 5 college students walk in late over 11 years ago, and to think now that thousands of people are coming out there, for me, it's a full circle moment. I get happy thinking about it. I get emotional thinking about it. And it's funny because I'll be telling that story and I'll see somebody yawn and I'll get mad because how can you yawn? But God spoke to me about that one time. He said, they don't know. They don't know. They don't know what it cost. They don't know where it started. They don't know, Greg. They don't know about the senior center, Autumn. They don't know. You know. You've been giving in these offerings for over 10 years now. And every time comes an opportunity to give, we give joyfully, we give cheerfully, so that the story can continue, so that the circle will be unbroken. Do you remember the song, By and by, Lord, by and by, will the circle be unbroken? Kind of wonder that about our church, or will we be like Israel, that after we get settled into nice buildings, will we stop somewhere? Will the next generation own the story? Next weekend, it's not just an offering that we're taking. It's a story that we're stepping into. And in honor of that story, I want to tell you a story today, a story that Elijah started me thinking about when he said, when did elevation get big? And I started to tell him the stories. And I began to think about all the Bible stories, you know, the ones that you know and some of the ones that you don't know. Some of the ones that you've heard since you were little, maybe David and Goliath, the parting of the Red Sea, when Jesus fed 5,000 hungry souls with a Captain D's lunch that Andrew had to beat up a little boy to take. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but it doesn't say how they got it, so that's my story. I'm sticking to it. But Holly's favorite Bible story is in 2 Kings chapter 4. I didn't check with you to see if this is still your favorite Bible story, because if it's not, it's gonna mess up my introduction. So it's a story of a woman from a place called Shunem. If you're really, really churchy, she's known as the Shunammite woman. And shake your head and nobody will know that you have no idea who the Shunammite woman is. It's all right. By the way, we started our church for people who have no clue who the Shunammite woman is. All right? So please don't feel bad if you don't know this stuff. And there's a Bible story, because Holly is a church girl. Her dad was a Baptist pastor, and she, at one point in her life, was going to church 6 nights a week. 6 nights a week she had to sit through these Bible stories. So she loves this story, maybe because it's a little more obscure, but it's a good story. Let me read to you real quick. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 8. One day Elisha went to the town of Shunem. A wealthy woman lived there, and she urged him to come to her home for a meal. After that, whenever he passed that way, he would stop there for something to eat. She said to her husband, I'm sure this man who stops in from time to time is a holy man of God. Let's build a small room for him on the roof and furnish it with a bed, a table. Don't worry, I'll go to IKEA. It won't cost too much. Chair and a lamp. And then he'll have a place to stay whenever he comes by. That's Holly's favorite Bible story. Can you believe? You've got a book with the walls of Jericho come falling down. You got a resurrection from the dead. And of all the stories she could pick, that's her favorite story. Touch somebody, say, there must be more to the story. Well, there is. There's always more to the story. You know that, right? When you hear somebody's story, you're hearing their side, not the story. You have to learn this as a pastor, because I used to have people come and meet with me and they would tell me their story and they were so sincere. And then I talked to their wife. And she told the same story from a different side, and I found out that there's always more to the story. If I didn't find it out as a parent, a pastor, I have certainly found it out as a parent, because my kids will come running up to me. Graham will come running up. Abby just hit me. The other day, Elijah came running up to Holly, said, Abby bit me. She just bit me. And Holly said, she just bit you? You weren't doing anything and she just bit you? Touch somebody and say, there's more to the story. And he said, yeah, well, I had my hand over her mouth, but she just bit me. Trying to say there's more to the story, and you will make a fool of yourself if you charge into situations and don't realize there's more to the story. You learn this. It takes a little bit of life to learn that there's more to the story, because we live in a world that has confused snaps with stories. Can I preach for 39 minutes and 17 seconds? 16 seconds, 15 seconds. A snap is not a story. I'm not on Snapchat. I put it on my phone. I have an account. It's not very active because I'm not that cool. I'm more of an Instagram type fellow. I'm not quite Facebook. I'm not quite Snapchat. I'm somewhere in the middle. And they have Instagram stories and Snapchat stories. But those aren't stories. Those are scenes. You can't judge the story by the scene. Talk to me, Elevation Ballantyne. Are y'all having fun at University City? See, sometimes people will step into a scene of your life and think they know the whole story. But the scene is not the story. If you had seen Joseph at one point in his life, I'm in the Old Testament book of Genesis, he would have been in a pit. If you would have seen Joseph in another scene of his life, he would have been in a prison. But if you had seen Joseph at the point in his life that was the culmination of his calling, he was in a palace saving many lives. Some of y'all need to know the scene you're in today is not your story. It's not your destination. It's just a layover. Don't stop the story just because you don't like the scene. It's the power of a full circle moment. It's the power of staying with the story even when you don't like the scene. My God, this man is preaching. The scene is not the story. The scene is not the story. I don't mean to mess up your precious moment's nativity, but he didn't stay in a manger. That's a scene, but it's not the story. He grew in wisdom and stature, in favor with God and with men. He opened blinded eyes. He caused the lame to walk, the deaf to hear, the mute to speak. He taught with authority, unlike their teachers of the law. They hung him on a cross, but that's not the story. That's a scene. The devil had a party on Saturday morning, but Saturday morning was just a scene. Early one Sunday. I'm about to preach, Denver. I'm about to preach. There's more to the story. There's more to the story. The head that once was crowned with thorns is crowned with glory now. There's more to the story. I'm convinced that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that will be revealed in us. When God gets done writing my story, I will see the goodness of the Lord. Should I just dismiss right now? Because I got more to say, but man, I feel like somebody's in the middle of a scene. A scene, and maybe it looks like this right now. Can't get to a resurrection without a crucifixion. And everybody's story starts somewhere. When did Elevation get big? I laughed because it was 8 families, 8 crazy families. If you would have seen Elevation in those days, it's laughable now. It's laughable to look back. We were proud of it then because we were starting a story. And a lot of people don't know the story. It's okay. I'm not trying to be like your grandfather. I'm trying to tell you about uphill in the snow, 13 miles. Before high-speed internet, back in the day. It's a story. And the generation after Joshua didn't know the story. And it's hard to sacrifice for a story that you don't own. So this morning, before I came out to preach, I asked Holly, could she bring the kids in back to the office that I have back there real quick? And I asked them to sit down. And very briefly, probably 5 minutes or less, I told them the story. And I wrote my offering check for what I believe God had called me to write it for. We've been doing this every year because I don't want the story to stop here. It's not that I need another building. It's just that I don't believe our story has completely been told. I believe there's more that God wants to do. And so when I give next weekend and when you give next weekend, we're not just writing a check. I hope you know that. We're telling a story. The story that God loved me and he gave his son for me. And now it's a privilege for me to give back to him. And there will be people that will give various amounts, and some will give what seems small, some will give what seems big. One woman in the Bible, she took some oil and poured it on Jesus' head, and Jesus was so moved by the gesture because it represented a sacrifice. He said, wherever the story of the gospel is told, this woman's story is going to be told with it, because when you absorb your little story into God's big story, you make history. And we're going to make history next weekend. It's going to be awesome, and many will give. Maybe one person will give $1 million. I never forget when they called me and said somebody had dropped $1 million in the bucket. That was awesome. That's how we built Blakeney. $1 million in the bucket. He was so cool about it too. He didn't call a special meeting on the golf course or at Morton's. Just dropped it in the bucket right beside somebody else's 10. And we all did it together, and we all built it together. And it's awesome. And everybody has a story, how God spoke to them, what God called them to do. And where your story starts, it has a lot to do with how you see your story, how you tell it. So I was just telling the kids, I didn't want them to think that it's always been this way. So I was telling them, this is what we've been doing every year. And so many people have given faithfully. And I kind of tried to tell them a little bit of their story about the house me and Holly bought in Shelby after we moved out of Juniper Terrace apartment C15, the one that I'm really proud that I was able to get. It was $410 a month. We looked at one that was $700 a month, and I thought maybe one day, but the $410 a month was what I could do at the time. We were very proud of it. We brought our first Christmas tree home, me and Holly, to that apartment, but then we found a house on Delwood Drive, and I bought the house, 10% down, proud to buy the house. We'd been saving her teacher's salary, trying to live off of my income from preaching and traveling and a small job, part-time job that I had at a church, and we bought that house with 10% down. And I took them all the way through, just telling them the story, because I want them to know the story, that when we moved to Charlotte, how the church that was going to pay my salary for the first part of the church backed out after we had already bought our house here in Charlotte. And that was a lot of fun. That was a great scene. But the scene wasn't the story. You can't let it stop you when somebody else pulls back. If God is for you, who can be against you? And so we moved forward in faith. And we bought a house in Charlotte, and we were living in this one house, and we were saving up to buy for another piece of land. We wanted to buy a piece of land and build on it. And when we had saved it up, God told us to give it away to an offering. We gave it away. We saved up again. God told us to give it away. One thing that I don't ever worry about is when people criticize me, because they don't know the whole story. They don't have to know. God knows. I know. But I want my children to know. Then we saved it up again and we bought the land. And it was awesome. And we live there now. But I took them back to that first house. And I didn't tell them how much it cost, but I told them that this check is the same amount that house cost. Elijah said, the 10% that you put down? I said, no, the house. The house. But it hadn't always been like this. God has blessed us. God's been good to us. The preacher was bragging today about his giving. No, he was leading. He was leading. This is our story. This is our story. Are you in it? Step into the story. Step into the circle. When you read the Bible, you got to step into the story. You can't just read the Bible without your senses. I'm very fond of saying, I heard it from Adrian DePrez, the youth speaker. He used to say, the Bible's not boring, you're boring. And I never knew what he meant by that. But what he meant is we know the stories on the surface. David kills Goliath and you can lose weight too. What? One time a few years ago, I don't know if you heard the girl that was being baptized today. She said she came to church during the Sticks and Stones series. I did 5 weeks on the story of David and Goliath. 5 weeks on the story. And I started back before when he had the slingshot. And I talked about how God found him in the field. Because you have to understand that part of the story to understand his victory. You have to understand that part of the story to understand his success, to put it in proper context. And then I told him how when we end the story, we talk about David hits Goliath with a rock. Goliath falls down. I use sound effects to get the point across. And then I talked about how normally the story stops there, but there's more to the story. David then stood over Goliath and cut off his head with his own sword. Sometimes the thing that the enemy uses to try to destroy you is the thing that God will use to deliver you. Don't start me preaching. And it's a story that maybe we've heard before. But that's not the whole story. David handed the sword to the priest. The priest put it in the temple. Years later, David was on the run, and he went into the temple, and he needed a weapon. And the priest said, the only one I have is the one you took from Goliath, because every future victory is dependent on you completing your current assignment. And everything you do for God here will be waiting for you in your future. But see, if all you know is he hit him with a rock, I know that story. It's more to the story. It's more to the story. When that girl was getting baptized today, did you see her? Some of you on TV, you didn't see it. It was amazing. She's at our new campus, right? Or it's not a new campus, it's a new building. I mean, it's not a new campus. There were people meeting in the middle school back here so that we could be in the building today. Setting up, tearing down, setting up, tearing down, setting up, tearing down, and all the way back to 5 college students that went through. It's part of a bigger story, but that girl was getting baptized today, and she got to one point in her story. Did you hear? She said, and I struggled with loneliness and isolation. To us, it was a sentence, but she started crying. Why? What was a sentence to us is her story. When I praise God, you need to understand, you can't understand the magnitude of my celebration if you don't know my story. He was there for me. He bled for me. You don't know what he's done for me. You don't know my story. Why do you scream when you preach? Because I prayed God would give me a church since I was 16. And when I look at you, it makes me want to. But if you don't know my story, you don't understand my scream. Anyway, there's more to the story. She built a room. She's a wealthy woman. This is Holly's favorite Bible story. I'm going back and forth. I know a little bit. Stay with me. I'll bring it all full circle. So are you with me, Blakeney? Uptown? Okay, I need to make sure. She said to her husband, let's build him a room now. Her intention was to do something to make an impact, to be a blessing. Her heart was, I know this is a man of God. This is where I hear the word of God from. This is an important decision. She made him a meal one day. This is the story. Started so small, she just made him a casserole. Tuna casserole. Come on, let's fix it up. Give it a little bit of aroma. He said, you sure can cook, Shunammite woman. I'll be back. And he was back. He kept coming so much. She's like, we ought to build another story. Another story. She wasn't just building a room. She was starting a story. I'm not just giving an offering. I'm starting a story. I'm going to tell my son that he's going to tell his son. This is my story. I'm telling a story that was begun when I gave my life to Christ. And it didn't stop when I gave my life to him. It just began. Why do we stop the story at the point of salvation? If your story stopped when you got saved, God would have killed you when it happened. Boom, snatch you up. You're supposed to do something while you're here. Story. There's more to the story. And when they get baptized in our church, I always want to tell them, now, you know this is to be continued, right? Like, you know that eventually your hair is going to dry and you're going to have to go back to work on Monday. There's more to the story. We don't tell people this a lot of times because, well, we only want them to see the part of the story that we're comfortable with. The story that you tell, let me put it to you this way. How much you tell is determined by how much you trust. So I can't tell everybody my whole story. I shouldn't tell everybody my whole story. Sometimes we don't even tell ourselves the whole story. And so she built him a room. She built another story. Core team, just about 11 years ago, was building a church, and we had no idea. How could we have known at the time that you would be here? How could we know who will be here from now? But it's up to us where the story stops. 3 parts of every story you tell, right? Where you start it, where you stop it, and what you skip. Some of us should learn about the third thing. You ever been around somebody who has to tell you every detail of what color the bow in her hair was? I do not care. I did not ask you all that. And when Elijah asked me, how did Elevation get big? I don't know if he knew that he was going to be sitting for the next 50 minutes. Because you should do this sometime. I did this with I had a meeting this week with our apprentice program of people who had come to Charlotte to be apprentices at Elevation. And I told them, draw a circle. Go ahead and get a clean page. You need the whole page for this. And you can finish it when you get home, but draw a big circle, takes up the whole page. And I asked them, how did you get here? Then I said, draw another circle inside that one, a little bit smaller. How did you get there? Draw another one. How did you get there? Draw another one. How did you get there? See, sometimes it's only when you start connecting the circles that you see that everything you went through in your life was for a reason. It was a ripple. It was a ripple. She built a room. She cooked a meal. They gave an offering. Our core team of the church gave 10% as a tithe and then 10% more, and we didn't have a lot of money. We had no idea what we were starting. Had no idea we'd give $21 million to outreach in less than 11 years. No idea. You would clap if you had given to it because it was a ripple. It was a ripple effect. And we didn't know when we dropped the rock, and she didn't know when you have no idea what you set off in your life by marrying Jordan Hicks. You didn't just change your last name. It changed everything. It's going to change your lineage. The X's and the Y's and all of it is dependent upon her decision. And she rolled over and said to her husband, I think maybe we should build this guy a room. I mean, we should do it. And she started a story. And let me tell you something. She had no idea what kind of story she was stepping into. Let me tell you right now. She thought she was doing something nice for God. God was just looking for a way to do something for her. There's more to the story. She had a nice house. She had a big bank account. She drove a Range Rover. 2017 Range Rover. But she had a barren womb. There's more to the story. See, stuff doesn't tell the whole story. You can be very beautiful and very barren. You can be extremely loaded and very empty. There's more to the story than what you wear. There's more to the story than what you weigh. There's more to the story than the neighborhood that your kids are growing up in. Some of the weirdest kids grow up in the nicest neighborhoods. I'm getting loose now. Pray for me. Say any of that at 9:30, but I'm talking to you. You're the ones who need this strong teaching. You're a little farther gone than the other ones. Tell your neighbor there's more to the story. Please tell him there's more to the story. And Elisha lays down to sleep one night in his comfortable bed that the Shunammite woman had built just for him. And he's thinking, what can I do for her? And she was thinking, what can I do for him? And he's thinking, give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. And her initiative met God's initiative. And Elisha called her in. I can't figure out why, but he didn't talk to her directly. He had his servant, Gehazi, speak to her. She's standing right there in the doorway. Read it in the Bible. Read it in the Bible. Do you read your Bible? The Bible's not boring. You're boring. And he said, hey, what can I do for you? And she did not have a list. To her, God wasn't Santa Claus. She didn't give so she could get. She had a mentality that I get to give. Everything that I have is a gift from God. Why wouldn't I give it back to him? Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I? I don't need anything. I'm fine. And she was fine. She was fine on the outside, but she'd never been able to have a child. See, the story didn't start in 2 Kings chapter 4. The story started years before that. How many times had this woman tried to have a baby? How many times had she bought another pregnancy test? How many trips to Target? Only to be disappointed. I'm telling the story the way I want to tell the story, all right? And he said, next time you go to Target, buy some blue paint. She said, Target don't have paint. He said, whatever, it's not the point. She said, you don't like the color of your room? These prophets build them a room, they don't even complain about the color. No, you're not painting my room. About this time next year, you're gonna have a baby boy. And she did. And that's the story. Because God keeps his promises. And I guess that's why you like the story so much, because when she made room for God, God did something in her that she couldn't do for herself. And that's the story. Well, there's more to the story. That baby grew up to be a boy. You know those puppies grow up to be dogs. Think about that while you're having them, Jordan. Take your time. When the boy was out in the field one day, he said he had a headache. He was real weak. He was acting real strange. And her son kind of collapsed in the field, and the dad did what all good dads do. It's kind of what we do. Said, take him to his mom. It's a true story. You got to read this. This is 2 Kings chapter 4 if you read the whole chapter. See, we stop in the middle of the sentence because it preaches good to say, and she built a room, she built another story on the house, and she had a child. And when you're giving this offering, God's going to give it to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. Watch this. They brought her the child died on her lap. Sometimes even the dreams that God births will die. Sometimes they'll die. And now she has a decision to make. Is this the scene or is it the story? She decided that she would take it back to the place where the promise was originally conceived. She went back upstairs to that empty guest room, that story, that second story. She laid that dead child on that bed, and she went to go see Elisha. She knew what to do. When you get stuck in a scene, you go back to the one who started the story to begin with. And she found him, and she fell at his feet, and Gehazi, the servant, wanted to push her away, but she was persistent. The story can't end like this. The story can't end like this. And she summoned the man of God, and she insisted that he come back, and he went in and he closed the door and he laid his body on that boy's body. And the first time nothing happened, and the second time the boy started to sneeze 7 times, got up and lived. And that's the story. It's a good story because it lets you know that whatever is barren in your life can still bring forth, and whatever dies can come alive with one word from God. When he breathes into it, I believe some things are gonna be resurrected in your life. I believe in the life cycle of the word of God. Nothing that he speaks returns void. It accomplishes what he sent it to do. So I was talking to Holly one day, and I said, isn't it crazy, the second part of the Shunammite woman's story? She said, yeah, when the child dies and is raised from the dead. Do you remember this? I said, no, the other part of the story in chapter 8, the second half of the story. She said, chapter 8, the Shunammite woman's story is in chapter 4. Now remember, she's the daughter of a Baptist pastor. She's supposed to know this stuff. I said, woman, weren't you paying attention in Bible school? Bible class, Vacation Bible School, the Wayside Baptist Church in West Kendall. Weren't you paying attention? The story didn't stop in chapter 4. The story didn't stop when the child was born. The story didn't stop when the child died. The story didn't stop when the child was raised to life. Can I show you chapter 8 real quick? Because Holly didn't know this part. I'm embarrassed for her. She should have known this part. I better get to the text real quick. Everybody pray for me. Look at this, chapter 8. Everybody say chapter 8. The number of new beginnings. There had been a 7-year famine in the land. And Elisha had told the woman whose son he had brought back to life. Now watch this. The Bible can't call her the woman whose son Elisha had brought back to life if the son had never died. Some of the worst scenes make the best stories. Some things God has to let you go through, so when he brings it back around, you'll have a story to tell. Chapter 8, chapter 8, chapter 8, chapter 8. And there was a famine in the land, and the prophet said, take your family and move to some other place, for the Lord has called for a famine on Israel. A famine. The Lord called for famine. I thought God sent the rain. The same God who sends rain will often allow you to go through a famine. That's how he builds your faith. We tell you God will bless you, and he will. But the same God that will allow you to carry the blessing will allow you to carry the burden. How else would your back become strong enough to take it? How else would you stay humble? There's more to the story than God will bless you. Yes, he'll bless you. He'll bless you in the time of rain. He'll bless you in a famine. He'll bless you when the economy is up. He'll bless you when the economy is down. He'll bless you when friends love you. He'll bless you when friends leave you. And the miracle is not that God prevented the famine, but that he provided for her through it. So the woman did as the man of God intended. She took her family and settled in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. And she went where God told her to go, but while she was gone, they confiscated her land. So watch this. After the famine ended, she returned from the land of the Philistines and had to go see the king about getting back her house and land. I love this woman's initiative. Come over to my house and eat something. Heal this boy that you told me to have in the first place. I'm going straight to the king, walking past all the people who can't do anything about it, right up into the king's court to see about getting her land back. Maybe you need to come to the king today to see about getting your joy back, your peace back, your hope back, your dream back, your passion back. Who am I preaching to, Blakeney? And she walked in. And as she came in, verse 4, I can't believe you never read this part, Ollie. This is the best part. I love my wife. As she came in, the king was talking with Gehazi. Remember him, the servant of Elisha? The one who told the woman, you're going to have the baby because Elisha told him to tell her. Gehazi is standing there, the servant of the man of God. And the king had just said, watch the timing of God. The king had just said, tell me some stories about the great things Elisha has done. And Gehazi was telling the king, how good is God at his job? And Gehazi was telling the king about the time Elisha had brought a boy back to life. At that very moment, the mother of the boy walked in, and her need collided with God's provision, and her past collided with her future at just the right time. And Gehazi said, wait a minute. I think that's her. It's who? That's the woman I'm telling you about right now. The woman that made the casserole and built the room and bed and the lamp and the chair, had the son, and he died. And I tried to push her away, but Elisha went to her house, and I don't know what he did when he went in that room because I wasn't in there and I didn't see it for myself, but he came out with the boy and the boy was breathing. And I think that's her. I hadn't seen her in 7 years, but I swear that's her. 15 years ago, I would have said, where's Ashton? Am I being punked right now? This is crazy. This is crazy. And in a full circle moment, the woman walks in. And what she did in chapter 4 is waiting for her chapter 8. Boop, 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 boop. Made a meal, built a room, had a son, lost a son, had a son, left town, came back, saw the king, walks in. Gehazi says, that's her. I'm telling you, I would recognize her anywhere. Walked in while Gehazi was telling her story. And God's story met her story. And her story met his story. And it all came full circle. Now, if the son hadn't died, would the story even exist? Gehazi's not going to tell the king about a woman who had a baby. Lots of women have babies. It was the fact that she lost the baby that made her story worth telling. It was the fact that she couldn't have the baby that made his birth miraculous. It was the scene she would have chosen to skip that brought her to this place. How many know God is working all things together for your good? I need you to stand up and give God some kind of praise. Some kind of praise. If you know he's working in your life, I might not see it, I might not feel it, I might not know the story right now, but God is telling my story. My story is still being told. I'm not staying in this pit. I'm not staying on this cross. I'm not staying in this grave. I'm barren now, but God promised to bless me. And the king looked at the woman, and the woman looked at Gehazi. And the king said, is it true? You know what's cool? She didn't have to convince him of her miracle, because her miracle was standing with her. As she walked in with that boy, I'm going to say it. It might come across wrong. I'm going to say it. I feel it in my heart. You are my miracle. I prayed for this church that you're sitting in when I was 16, back in Monk's Corner. I prayed God would allow me to have a ministry to people where I could preach the Bible and help it come alive so they could step into the story of God. And here you are, and here I am. And we've got a story to tell. And the world needs our story. The world needs our story. The world needs our story. The world needs to know he died. The world needs to know he rose. The world needs to know he reigns. The world needs to know he is our God, and we are his people, and we tell his story. And that's what the offering is about next weekend, and that's what the church is about, and it's about his story. Your story, his story. She walks in, and Gehazi's talking, and she walks in, and she didn't understand it while she was going through it, but it's come full circle. And the king said, is it true? Put it back up, verse 6. And she told him the story. You got a story to tell. What story will you tell? I got to tell my son a story this week of a church that is generous, sacrificial, and mission focused. I got to tell him the story of a God who has always provided for me. And that's gonna be his story. That's gonna be his story. What story will you tell? What story will we tell? Will another generation arise that didn't own the story? Talking about how Elevation Church used to see hundreds of people come to Christ every weekend. The church where they used to give millions of dollars every year to outreach. Or are we going to keep the story going? That's the question. Where it starts, where it stops, what you skip. And if you skip this part called sacrifice, you don't get to see the part called significance. It must come. She's snapping at me, preaching good. She told him the story. So he said to one of his officials, see that everything she has lost is restored to her, including the value of the crops that had been harvested during her absence. He said, not only are you going to give it back, there's more to the story. You're going to repay it with interest. Won't God do it? You got to shout like you believe it now. I'm standing in this circle. It must be told. This story must be told. We have a story to tell. We have a church to build. We have a job to do. You have a story to tell. It's your story. Have you owned it? Or have you just been told it? Until you own the story that you've been told, until it is your story, it has to be personal. I have a story. He saved me. I have a story. He called me. I have a story. He redeemed me. I have a story to tell, and it must be told. It must be told. Somebody say it must be told. Come on, find 7 people for all 7 years of famine. Tell them it must be told. It must be told. I got a story to tell, and it must be told. It must be told. It must be told. This is our story, church. He lived, he died, he rose, and he lives again. This is our story. Will you tell it? Tell it.